Hi, this is the help video or the lecture for Chapter 13. So, interactivity paradigms that work. So, this chapter is all about showing examples of different models that have been successful in using interactivity. So we're just going to talk briefly about all of these, although I want you to read through each of them carefully. The first one is trapdoor hints. So sometimes complex tasks have to be overlearned so that they're automatic. And the example here is a reservation and ticketing operation for an airline. So the individual that's doing the ticketing needs to be able to put something like this in, understand it, be able to do it effortlessly, automatically, with a lot of things going on. So a successful and innovating instructional design called for extensive learner practice using a simulated trap door to provide hints when learners asked for them. Hints were hidden beneath a spring-loaded trapdoor simulation. So if we look at this, right here is the trapdoor. And so the hints themselves would start from very generic down to the last hint, which would be like giving them the answer, right? But it, so each of, and the doors only open while the person's clicking on the trap door. The minute they let go, the hint is gone. So they have to look at it and figure it out, and because they can't go back and work on the screen with the trapdoor open, right? So that helps them really try and internalize what the hint is saying, right? So, of course, then it takes longer to get through that. So it's easy. If it's easier to learn than to get help, then they'll try harder to succeed without asking for help. So hey, that's the takeaway. But we want to give them the help they need as they're first learning it. So the context for that is that they're given a simulated view of a crowded ticket counter with a lot of different noises going on. And the challenge would be that they have to, given a basic overview of commands, instruction, rules, and then figure out through the activity to put in the command correctly, right? The feedback, there's two levels for this one. A general statement of error, the first time a error is given, and then a second level that requires learners to think and internalize information rather than letting the learner flounder or guess or simply parroting. Hints were written to help learners make the correction. Instead of giving it to them, they were giving them the feedback to do it themselves. So the trapdoor hints is a model. Once you get it done, you can use it over and over, and it's been used for a long time now. So the trapdoor hint is easy to program, and it, when appropriate, it's very, very useful. Second model is a task model. As many tasks become more information-based and systems become more complex, the number of procedures to be learned increases dramatically. So having learners follow around with an instructor's do what I do gives them this false sense of impression, right? If you can follow along with me, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it on your own. So once you're off doing it on your own, you find out that you might hit the wall rather easily and not know where to go. So the learners need to have some confidence that they can figure out these new processes with some efficiency. So the task model is an effective approach to learning procedures that lets users learn by doing rather than by watching. And so the example here is one that was done in the new NYU Medical clinic, hospital, I'm not sure, using the integrated clinical information system. And so people needed to be trained on this to change the papers to the paper documents to integrate it into this information system. But rather being passive observers of someone else using the software, the task model lets users learn by practicing to mastery. The model breaks each task into a series of logical steps composed of unique gestures, their inputs, clicks, whatever. Learners complete each step and are given feedback in their process. So the context of this model is that it's a simulated NYU medical system that is used to maintain patient orders, maintain records for patient orders and documentation. So the challenge is to perform tasks in the software without being told to, right? That's the challenge. Eventually, they must accurately complete the task without making mistakes or needing help. And here's an example of the window. And here we have our little scenario, or setting it up. Here we see where we're at. We can move forward. We can get out. All kinds of navigations built in there. Although various forms of help are available, learners are encouraged to see if they can meet the challenge on their own. So the activity is that they operate the simulated software exactly as they would the real software, performing the appropriate mouse and keyboard gestures, right? And a variety of learning aids are provided, so including a task demo and a step demo. So a task demo would show them the complete task from start to stop. A step demo would just show them that one specific step, and then there's hints built in, right? So they have to move through this and get it back, get it right. So the feedback for this would be see where the errors are made. The simulation itself provides intrinsic feedback, the most valuable feedback for learning in the form of consequences. Okay. Progress information is also shown. I pointed that out to you. This model is reusable. And here's when you might want to reuse it. The third kind, enhanced drill and practice. We see enhanced drill and practice can be one of the most effective instructional techniques, even for teaching new concepts. With performance-sensitive algorithms, it becomes quite sophisticated in its ability to adapt to the learner's skill and readiness level, adjusting both practice repetition and new content introduction in the process. So we're going to talk about this. Siegel and Misselt in '84 developed this approach called corrective feedback paradigm, CFP, corrective feedback paradigm. This approach provides an effective pattern to learn and rehearse problem sets. When the learner fails to complete a problem correctly, it's presented again after one or two other problems are worked. So let's look at the example. So here we have a series of cards, if you will. And if you get an incorrect answer, so 2 plus 2 is not 6, this is shuffled back a few, 1 or 2 back in the deck. So you come on that same problem pretty quickly. If you get it correct, then it gets reshuffled back so into later in it. And then if you get it more than one time correct, and it could be 3 times or whatever the standard is, then it goes away from the card deck altogether. So if you fail in this task, it gets put close, so you have to do it again. If you fail again, it gets 1 or 2 actions away. If you get it right, it gets moved farther back in the deck, so you have a lot more between it, and it comes up again. If you can continue to get it right, then it's shuffled out of the deck, right? So that is an example of corrective feedback paradigm where that's what it is. So the example here is who wants to be a miller, and so this was to help cooks understand the different types of flours needed in recipes. But there's a step before that they need to understand what is in each type of flour. And so this subtask took the form of a game. Who wants to be a miller? And so the context is this conveyor belt of empty flour sacks that needs to be filled with the right kind of flour, all-purpose cake, bread, whatever. And then the milling plant has the hoppers, right? So the challenge is learners must fill each bag with exactly the right ingredient for each type of flour and demonstrate the ability to do so reliably. So they're mixing what is in cake flour. They're mixing what's going to be poured into this whole wheat. It's not what is all-purpose or whole wheat or cake flour used for in your cooking. That's the next step. This is the step where they figure out from the miller what ingredients go and what's the process to create cake flour, because they need to understand that before they can use it appropriately in their baking and cooking. So the activity is what I just said. They have to get the correct ingredients: hard winter wheat, soft winter wheat, salt, baking powder, and put it into the bag in the right amount of ingredients, the right ingredients and the right amount to mix. And then their feedback is they get some kind of animation or sound confirming. And when its process is complete, each bag is sealed, the conveyor belt moves on, and they move all of them. After all the bags of flour are filled correctly, repeatedly, then the conveyor belt stops. They're given an overall feedback of how much they filled correctly. Learners scoring less than 100% opt to try over again with the full expectation of making no errors, and then it's usually met. Okay, so it has reusability. So CFP is cool. It's appropriate for a lot of different situations, but it's not appropriate for all situations. So you have to figure out what is when it is appropriate. So he's got some information about that. Problem-solving investigation. Storytelling is a wonderful way to establish a context for communication and learning, and mystery stories hold special interest. And so this one is substance abuse, right? The students have to identify the culprit based on the evidence of substance abuse. So to identify the individual of concern, the supervisor must research observed behavior patterns for each potential offender and then choose a suspect without offending innocent individuals, invading privacy, or violating the company's policy. Once the suspect has been chosen, the student has to follow a prescribed process for confirming the suspicion. So it's a simulated investigation, right? So the context is that you're a team manager with 6 direct reports. You're responsible for their safety and well-being. Evidence suggests you have somebody on your team with a substance abuse problem. The challenge is to follow procedures properly to determine who you think was drinking on the job. So the activity, there's multi-step. First, to review daily notes on each individual, then identify the person most likely, right? So you would review each activity, I guess, and then once the learner has been identified, they have to have a variety of investigative and referral steps they can take, right? So how do you want to proceed? Discuss, ask, confirm, right? So you've identified, and now what are you going to do? Which steps? The application presents consequences and uses feedback guidance to present much of the instructional content. This allows learners to dive right in and show what they already know. So that's pretty cool. Here's an example of feedback. It's premature to discuss your concerns with the employee at this time, right? So if that's what you put first, it's probably not the best thing. Engaging in this conversation before you've covered yourself legally, and so on, right? Next one is discovery. So discovery learning, controversial as it may be, is one of the most interesting and motivating of all learning models, and effective when done right. So in this course, they have the students respond to reported suspicious activity. They must then research the situation and determine when the facts justify an escalation to Homeland Security. So in this, there's many subjective decisions folded into the judgment making, right? So the context: upon a call regarding potential terrorist activity, learners take a role of a responding officer to select and go to various locations. The challenge is to collect information to determine whether to escalate the situation to Homeland Security and defend your decision. The activity: by selecting the presented choice, and determine what actions need to take on the investigation. And then the feedback is delayed until the learner makes his or her case. So there's nothing along the way, right? And then a detailed appraisal is given on the decision whether or not to escalate. All right, storytelling. Storytelling is an effective strategy for teaching a wide range of content through stories or scenarios. And so this one was done for the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And so the scenarios in this training are true stories. And the stories typify the complex and dynamic nature of domestic violence.
My apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
So the goal is to increase awareness in the struggles that victims of domestic violence face, illustrate that domestic violence is a community problem, show that we all have a role to embrace order and in order to end domestic violence, encourage everyone to think creatively and act intentionally to assist victims. Students choose a story by selecting a person from a photo roster. Then they read the scenario and make decisions on what to do based on the choices listed. Depending on the choice, the story will have an appropriate ending to the choices, right? So the context is they get this list of characters. They have to pick one. The challenge here is unique and powerful. As each story unfolds, the victim's choices are presented, right? The challenge is to face decisions that these victims had to make and to make your own choice. As you read each story segment, choices like this, unfolding stories present options. So here's an unexpected visitor, and here's what you need to do. Feedback is the creative piece asks students to reflect on their experience, feelings, and thoughts. Students respond to questions presented at the end of the scenario, and then by clicking buttons, email their responses to the instructor. The feedback is very personal here. So the instructor would provide, based on the scenario and the different choices that this person made, they would give them specific feedback, right? So that's a little more work. But the takeaways, all of these are excellent examples of instructional interactivity. So always keep that uppermost in your mind when you are charged with doing a training, right? You need to make it as interactive as possible, and not just clicking and dragging, but instructionally interactive. And hopefully you understand what that concept means now. All right, thank you.